Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anybody on the phone bridge, please?
Nobody on the phone, right, Your Honor?
Thank you. Okay, we have two presentations tonight. First one is position classification and compensation study with ABDO. And second one is MnDOT Project Team will give a brief update on the sidewalks and on Truck Highway 2 Downtown Sidewalk Replacement. But anyway, we'll start with ABDO first. Yes, thank you for being here. Yes.
Our HR advisory team. Since joining the firm about 3 years ago, almost all of my work is in the compensation space. And then the majority of that compensation work falls within the public sector. So I really do spend the majority of my time here doing these compensation classification studies. And then also on the screen here, we have Leah Davis. She's a partner at ABDO and leads our workforce solutions team, our HR advisory team. Her and I work really closely throughout compensation study season, which is now through October, I would say. And since we have a few projects going on that have similar timelines to yours, I wanted to make sure to introduce Leah, as she will be working with me on the project, even though I'll be leading it. And just depending on how various council meeting schedules shake out with our various clients, Leah might be coming in at the end of the project to present, or it might be me. Sometimes we have to divide and conquer. Okay, so I wanted to talk through some of the benefits of a strategic compensation study. The first one up here is updated and compliant job description. And this is something that I've already talked to the project team about a little bit. And there's really a lot of benefit of having a compliant job description outside of the compensation study, even as we look at things like recruitment, making sure that whatever you're posting out on those job boards is an accurate representation of the job. But it's also important from a compliance perspective. If you have, let's say, a public works employee get injured on the job, making sure that if they're coming back with lifting restrictions, that we've captured that effectively on the job description so that they can go to the doctors and get that workers' comp claim filled out or whatever it may be. There's really a lot of benefit of having that job description accurate from outside of the compensation lens as well. We're also going to be testing, or not testing, but making some recommendations on FLSA or the hourly versus salary classification in the city. So if you have any cities or any positions that are currently classified as exempt, we go through some of the FLSA testing and make some recommendations on if there's any that we think should be classified as non-exempt for the city to review as well. We're going to talk a little bit more about this classification, but it's really important for cities in Minnesota in particular because of pay equity reporting to have an objective position scoring and classification method. So we'll go through our methodology in a future slide here, but that is going to be critical for any city to remain compliant with pay equity. The other obvious one that we talk about for comp studies is aligning your city's compensation philosophy to the market. So it's one thing to make sure that we go out and get reliable market data, which we'll talk through. But we always want to make sure that we're thinking through where do we want to be positioned relative to the market. Some cities want to lead the market, some cities lag the market and lean on their benefits plan, others want to line up right at the market. So we'll talk a little bit about where your city wants to land at the end of the slides here. There's also a lot of design components that we'll talk with your project team about in terms of how we're going to design the compensation structure. Sometimes there's a heavy influence on employee performance or aligning with union scales. So really thinking through if it's on a step and grade table versus an open range, why or why not? Is it working? What other options might the city have? So we'll spend a lot of time working with your project team to try to make sure that whatever system we're designing is aligning with your strategic needs. I've touched on this already a little bit, but pay equity compliance is a very important measure for compensation and classification studies. Any plan that we recommend to a council, we have done testing on it to make sure that regardless of male-female classes that you might have within the city, that plan is going to be compliant with pay equity. So depending on where you're at in that 3-year reporting cycle, we want to make sure that you don't have to worry about the plan that we've recommended in terms of pay equity compliance. Another reason, kind of going back to that classification portion I had talked about, we will help clients establish position classification and scoring review processes for the future. So sometimes within a city, you might add a position might change to be kind of modified based on growth in the city or something like that where it warrants a scoring change. So we'll make sure that you have a clear and defined process to address any scoring changes and then in turn how that might impact where it lands on the pay scale. And the last point on here is really about making sure that we're giving you some clear decision-making documentation about how to implement a pay plan if you were to go with what our recommendations will be. And not only implement, but then administer the plan in the future. We want you to make sure that you have your project team equipped with the tools, resources, and knowledge to keep this plan in line with your compensation philosophy relative to the marketplace for years to come and not have to come back to us next year to get help cleaning it up again. Okay, so this is an abbreviated version of what you hopefully saw in the proposal that we presented. But just to kind of recap the project phases. Right now, we are in this first phase of job description review and updates. So I've been working with the city to identify which job descriptions will need to be rewritten and working with them to schedule some job analysis questionnaire trainings for your department heads to go through so that we can start collecting the information we need to update your job descriptions. Once we have the job descriptions updated, and your team has reviewed them, we'll be going through that classification process where we're going to assign a score to each one of the positions. We'll move kind of simultaneously, we'll be doing the market compensation analysis, and then we move into the system development and recommendations, kind of tying all of that in. As I mentioned, we will be doing pay equity testing on any plan that we're recommending, and then either myself or Leah will be coming back out to the council to with a final report and make some recommendations to you all. Okay, so as we go into the market analysis portion of the project, I wanted to take a slide to make sure this group understands where this information is coming from. So we have historically relied heavily on the League of Minnesota Cities salary survey. As of earlier today, I've checked, it's not available yet, but it should be coming out here any day now in June. So we're working with your city, your project team to identify who the comparable cities are that we want to go grab market data from. If there is a city that you say, hey, they're really good comparable, we want to make sure we're capturing their wage data for the study that did not respond to the LMC survey, we'll actually send them a survey of our own to make sure that we've collected that. Sometimes we might need to enlist the help of some of your staff to nudge the other city to respond, but we're usually fairly successful in collecting that data one way or another. The other source of information that we can tap into as needed is the Economic Research Institute, which is actually a private sector database that we have access to. So we don't use this for all of the positions within a city, but sometimes we'll work with clients that say, hey, we know we compete heavily for this position in the private sector, so I want to know what the private sector pays. Not all positions are transferable to the private sector, as you might imagine, but think like a mechanic or HR or some of your finance positions where there might be skill sets that are transferable to the private sector, and you want to know kind of what you're up against there, so we can leverage some of that data as well. This next bullet point is something that I always like to mention because I think it can be a little bit of a misconception about how we do market analysis. especially in the public sector. We don't get a job description for every survey respondent. So if I look at an accountant's job description at your city, I will have a really good understanding of the level of responsibility, the scope of that position, the detailed list of tasks that they may be assigned. But I don't see that for all of the cities that have responded to surveys. What we see is a brief 2 to 3 sentence summary that city has said, yep, this is what our accountant does. So we really rely on the job data summaries that are provided in the surveys, not an actual city by city job description comparison. Once we've collected all the data, what we're doing is comparing minimum and maximum wages for each position. So at this point in the study, we're not necessarily looking at employee pay rates, but looking at the pay ranges for a given position and comparing that to market. And that'll be kind of the first report out that we'll give to the city to say, hey, on average, you're stacking up compared to the minimums by X%, and same thing on the maximum side. And that can kind of give you a first look at some of the budgetary considerations that you might have as we look to recommend a new pay plan based on your pay philosophy. I'm going to pause here for a moment if there are any questions.
Michael, can I ask, when you're looking at those job descriptions and the max and minimum wages, are you looking at comparable city size as well?
Yeah, so I have a slide that will talk about this as well, but it's a great time for this question. We're working with the city to identify who are the comparable groups, and one of the factors in that is population size. We're also going to look at things like geographic area, both in relation to the city itself, but also in relation to other metropolitan areas. So how far out from a big metropolitan area are you? Because there may be some cities throughout the state that maybe aren't right next to you, but they're similarly positioned relative to another large metropolitan area. Okay, so this slide outlines our ABDO position scoring methodology. So every consultant that does this type of work in the state of Minnesota has their own methodology, but in reality, they're all measuring kind of similar things. But I thought it'd be helpful to take a few minutes to talk about our ABDO scoring methodology and what we'll be evaluating once we've finalized the job descriptions. So there are 4 major categories here. I'll start at the top there with know-how. This really talks about the job-specific knowledge and education requirements for a position. It's worth noting here that there's been a significant trend in the last couple of years across public sector, private sector, just with evaluating degree requirements. So that's something we're working a lot with our clients on to identify, is this a bachelor's degree required position, or can it be an associate's, or is it a bachelor's degree requirement or equivalent experience in lieu of a degree? So there's some, depending on how we phrase that, there is some scoring implications to that. But I just thought it'd be helpful for the council to hear that that's something we're seeing a lot of from our clients, and beyond is just a trend in recruitment right now. So it's something we've kind of adopted our scoring methodology to kind of stay current with the trend. We also look at human relation skills as part of know-how. So we know that some positions are responsible for delegating tasks, leading teams and things like that, while others are maybe just more of an individual contributor. And while they may need some baseline human relation skills, expected to be courteous and respectful and things like that, they're largely just kind of individual contributors. They don't need to lead, influence, interact greatly with the public or things like that. We're looking at problem solving. So one way to look at this is we kind of run a scenario of, is the problem presented most similar to a true or false question, where it's 2 very simple options to choose from, or is it more like a multiple choice where they maybe have a few more options of handling the problem? Is it more like an essay question where they don't really have options presented on how to solve the problem, but they're out there trying to figure that out independently? So we're kind of talking through that, as well as the context and precedent. So is this something the first time that this has come up, or is it established, we know these are the problems you're going to face, and here's the clear solutions to the problems that you might have? From there, we're going to look at the accountability of the position. So the freedom to act empowerment, that's really getting at, are you at the top where you don't necessarily need to run a decision by a superior, or do you need everything to be approved? If you're making a decision, we're going to look at the impact of that decision, both in terms of, is it going to trickle down to the rest of your department? And is it going to impact your overall budget? Is it a $1 million decision or a $500 decision? And just looking at the overall impact within the organization. Is the work that you're doing going to influence other departments, or is it really going to be isolated to the work that you're doing as an individual? And then the last section here is special conditions. So we're looking at some things like physical effort, environmental conditions. So Are you exposed to heat or extreme cold, snow, things like that? Hazardous exposure, if there's dangerous chemicals, or like police often has some hazardous exposure just with possible dangerous crime scene things. Sensory retention, we're looking at just an example of someone who would score high in sensory retention would be a bus driver because they have a bus full of people, they're obeying the traffic laws, driving the bus, versus someone like me. If I was scoring my own position, I spend most of my day just on Zoom or in a council meeting, so that I won't have a very high sensory attention score. So the last note on this, and this is one that we often get questions on, so we like to include it in here. Because every consultant that does this type of work is going to have their own methodology, it doesn't make sense to compare an individual score for a city with the neighboring city, for example. So sometimes we'll have clients come back to me and say, hey, the accountant in the neighboring city was at 150 points, but I'm only at 120 points. Why might that be? Well, the other cities went through a different consultant. They have a different scoring methodology. So the really only comparison that is relevant when we talk about position classifications is the hierarchy of scores within that organization. So when we meet with your project team to review the classifications, we'll really be looking at that kind of hierarchy and grouping of positions. So we expect your individual contributors to be scored lower than your department heads, and the city manager, city administrator would likely be your highest scored position. And then we determine, are there any that feel out of place in that order? And then we'll talk about why that might be. It could be that we've misinterpreted something in the job description. It could be that we need to modify or update it to be a more accurate reflection of the job, or maybe we modify the education requirements or something like that. But it's often a collaborative approach with the city to finalize those points, because at the end of the day, your department heads know your positions better than we will based on just the job description. So we want to make sure to include them in that process. So again, I'll pause here quick if there's any questions on the scoring methodology. No, okay. All right, so at this point in the presentation, I'd welcome the mayor or council. If you have comments on here, we'd love to hear your feedback. These are not necessarily things that I need to hear from everyone, but just more to get some thoughts going about the city's overall compensation philosophy. So starting from the top here, these are all kind of related essentially. But as you look at the city's overall compensation philosophy, do you have a sense of where you want to be positioned relative to market and how you want to be seen in the marketplace? Meaning, do you want to, at the end of the study, position yourself to be a few percentage points ahead of market, try to align as close as possible to market averages, or lag the market even? Are there any thoughts or comments from the council on market positioning?
I think one of our biggest issues has been attracting and then retaining.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that should be considered as we look at those positions. Specifically, if it's one that's like very hands-on for the city. I think that one of our biggest issues that we were seeing both in I think facilities mostly and in our police force was that we started out really great in our like initial compensation, but then, we were lacking as people were able to move up. And then, they were going to other police forces or sheriff's departments that had higher compensation. I think one of the other things with facilities that I'd heard was that they would get these certifications through the city to work on larger machinery, and then they would go to other places that were compensating them better. So I think it's those types of things that we probably would be mindful of. I think that, obviously it's a huge money suck for us to continuously to onboard these individuals, educate them, and then for them to leave us, right? And so I think it's things like that that should be considered as we go forward.
Yeah, that's really helpful to hear. So some of the options that you have as we look to build out a new plan, we're going to look at years to max, or how many steps might be in place to get to that max, and what is the percentage increase for each eligible, whether it's based on your anniversary or a static date. But those things all kind of tie into that retention, right? And then making sure that the maximums are aligned with the market maximums as well. That should help with retention as we look at, you might be able to, if you're recruiting really well, maybe your minimum pay is pretty competitive, but if people are leaving early, I would venture to guess that the step increases or the performance-based increases were not as it wasn't moving them through the market pay range as quickly as some of the competitors might have been. So that's really good feedback to hear. Anything else in terms of market position? Do you have a sense of, do you want to match the market or kind of try to lead the market at all?
I don't want us to be below the market.
Yeah.
I think
So-
comparable for sure, right?
Yeah.
Well, even with comparable cities, I've known in the past when we've had, comparable cities, sometimes it's not apples to apples. They may have higher tax base, or they may, have, I'm not sure. I just want to make sure that, with the comparable cities is that, they're probably in the same range as we are.
Well, and
Yeah.
I hope, Michael, that your rating system would also be part of that methodology, correct?
Yes,
As far
correct.
as,
So
like, making it comparable, like apples to apples, and I think that's probably one of the things they're addressing through that research part.
I think
yeah,
also,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I mean, also looking at it from the private sector, because to Christie's point, we train people in and then they may leave and it's not always to another public sector.
Yeah, you're right, and this all kind of speaks to our philosophy with identifying those comparable groups, and if even looping the private sector into that discussion is, we take the philosophy of casting a wide net to begin with, because I don't remember which one of you said, but it's not going to be apples to apples with every organization. It's going to be very difficult for any city to find 10 comparables that fit a very tight definition of what a comparable might be, because sometimes clients are really focused on population, other times they're really focused on tax base or geographic location. So we try to kind of take an approach of blending a lot of that to come up with a large list of possible comparables that will go and work with your city to narrow down. But it's also important to note that even if we were to get, say, 15 comparable cities that the city felt good about, that's not to say that we're going to have 15 matches for every one of your positions in the city, because the cities are going to be structured differently. They might have a manager when you have a supervisor. They might have a director for a department that doesn't exist in your city. So that's, again, why we like to try to cast that wide net, because we know that of the comparable group that you agree on, we're not going to have a match for every one of your positions. So the larger that comparable group gets while still remaining relevant, increases the likelihood that we're going to get enough market data for each one of your positions to be able to tell you, hey, confidently, this is what we think the market is for this given position.
It's also important to take in like the cost of living in our area. I mean, it is lower, but I want to make sure all of our full-time employees are being paid a livable wage that.
Yep, great point. And we so we don't have a great way, there isn't a report that we have access to that tells us exact cost of living adjustments. But what we do look at is, I think I mentioned earlier, some of the proximity to Metro kind of contributes to that, because we know if I were to grab a city right outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul, that they're competing with the metro area right next door. So they're going to have to pay a little bit better. Say the Twin Cities is by far the most competitive in terms of market position, the most competitive kind of geographic area in the state by a fair amount. So that's why we try to create some of those bubbles around the large metropolitan areas for some cities that are further out state to help address some of that.
Is the comprehensive plan like almost done?
It is still in process, but it should be completed in the next couple of months. I've reached out a couple of times, but I've not received a date certain.
I think and I don't know how long your study is going to take, but I think our comprehensive plan would also kind of give you a good idea about some of those as far as like the livable wage piece, because that is part of that initial study. So hopefully that'll be out sooner than later.
Okay. Yeah, that's great to hear. We're planning on, I believe I just pulled up the proposal. We had slated 150 days, so roughly through October, we had set for our timeline. But we're still, like I said earlier, we're still waiting for that LMC survey to come available. So I'll make sure to stay in touch with the project team on that. And if there's insights we can glean from that, we'll gladly factor that in.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And we'll talk again in a few months.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on, we have the MnDOT Project Team.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Thought we'll do an update for you guys tonight on the Downtown Sidewalk Project. A lot of you will remember myself, Matt Upgren with MnDOT. So I was involved with the corridor study. I'm a project manager at MnDOT, and I'm also the project manager on the current Downtown Sidewalk Project. Also with me tonight is Jake Nordic, who is the consultant project manager. And Jake works out of the Fargo area and is leading the design development and final plan development on the sidewalk project. So kind of the game plan tonight is we thought we would do an update for the council. I'm gonna corridor study, there were a couple new faces, and just so we're all kind of on the same page and kind of the genesis of this project. And then we'll talk a little bit about an update on the signals in town, and then Jake will even highlight a couple things on the project. And then after we kind of run through what we wanted to talk about, we want to hear from you guys if you've got questions, comments, things like that. So to briefly recap the project's history, in the fall of 2021, MnDOT and the City of Crookston entered into a joint powers agreement together, whereby the analysis and evaluation of the project corridor would be completed by a qualified consultant. That corridor study was paid for at approximately 2/3 MnDOT, 1/3 City of Crookston, which corresponded to the roadway ownership of those corridor segments. Prior to the commencement of the corridor study, the City of Crookston had brought forward concerns about the corridor to MnDOT. There were past attempts made by MnDOT to implement changes to the corridor to improve safety and change the corridor, but those changes never came to fruition as common ground was not found between the city and MnDOT. And so we opted not to do anything and try again so that we could get there together. So in 2021, a new approach was taken where MnDOT and the City of Crookston agreed to the joint powers agreement to fund the corridor study with the goal of developing community priorities, develop corridor alternatives, vet those alternatives, and then ultimately boil it down to one single preferred alternative. And the goal was a community-supported vision for the corridor. We would then use that preferred alternative as the vision going forward upon which the next road project would be based. MnDOT's portion of that corridor study runs from the bridge over the Red Lake River running north and west to 6th Street intersection near the train overpass, and then you guys at the city have included your own streets south of Roberts. As part of the corridor study, a community review panel was assembled with representatives from various groups and roadway users throughout the community. Based on feedback from that panel, individual business owner interactions and public surveys, the top priorities revolved around pedestrian safety and vehicle speed reduction. So that's what the technical team set out to address, and many different alternatives were brought forward, including one alternative where the road would no longer be a one-way, but rather two-way traffic. But ultimately, the alternatives were boiled down to the final preferred alternative or vision for the corridor, which keeps the one-way traffic, as you guys are used to, reduces the cross-section from 3 through lanes down to 2, keeps parking, and of course it reconstructs all the sidewalks to be ADA compliant. And we've also added some traffic calming measures, bump outs, bike lanes, things like that. In your packet, there should be some illustrations on this, what we're talking about tonight. And Jake will go over a few more of those here in a minute when he speaks. So as part of the corridor study, the 2 signals on 2nd Street, both at Broadway and Main, were flagged at the time for insufficient vehicle volumes to warrant reinstallation. The scope of work on the original corridor study never included a full intersection control evaluation effort. You'll hear us refer to it as an ICE report or an ICE study. That's intersection control evaluation. That's just the phrasing we use for it, but that basically just means MnDOT drilling down deeper on a specific intersection and doing a full analysis of how that intersection functions. So that was never included as part of the initial corridor study, but the consultant, SRF at the time, had noted that those were insufficient volumes. So this is discussed as in part of the final corridor study report. And given the fact that we were seeing low vehicle numbers at the time, it was decided that it needs to get looked at closer with the intention for MnDOT's traffic office to follow up with a more specific intersection control evaluation on all the signals. So recently, MnDOT's traffic office has put that work in and also solicited the services of SRF Consulting to complete that intersection control evaluation and that analysis. And we actually looked at all the signals on Highway 2 in the project footprint area. So what our traffic office has found is that they confirmed as suspected in the original corridor study that the Second Street signals are not meeting the warrant threshold for reinstallation. And furthermore, beyond that, the signal at Ash Street is also not meeting the reinstallation threshold, which did catch our traffic group off guard a little bit, but once they looked at the numbers, they were very, very low. Just when we say traffic volumes, that's just number of cars that go through there per day. So that one's not meeting the justification mark.
Matt,
at
so
Ash
what you're
Street.
saying is that we're taking out traffic lights and not putting them back in?
Yeah, what we're saying is based on the data we have in front of us today, and the warrant analysis is our way that it's a consistent statewide method of evaluating intersections and justifying signals. Based on the data we have today, those can't get reinstalled with the project, those three that I listed. The other two on Broadway can, or excuse me, on Roberts can. Those are meeting warrants. That's the data we have in front of us, but part of what we wanted to come here for tonight was to talk with you about this and bring this information to you guys now that we have that draft report coming in. We wanted to bring this to your attention. There's something we're missing or something that you guys wanted to talk to us about in regards to that. We want to have that dialogue. So that's why we're bringing this information to you guys, is to have that dialogue on the signals. The intersection control evaluation is not yet final, and that's why we thought now was a good time to have this conversation a couple years out from construction. So we want to hear your feedback. We want to hear what those local concerns are, comments, thoughts on this. Again, we're going off of the data and the methodology that we use around the state to justify or not justify signals, but there's also local considerations that we want to take into account. We do intend on holding a public open house in Crookston to get more information out there, keep the project information out there for folks who live in the community. And that was part of our goal here tonight. It's kind of two parts. First, we want to just bring you up to speed on this. And secondly, we want to hear feedback and thoughts from the council on where the project sits today and then how we can best work in the community to keep folks informed as we move forward. We recognize that there will probably be questions on the topic of signal warrants and signal justifications, so Jake and I will do our best here tonight to answer all those questions. If it is very specific questions at a granular level on the report development, that would be more for the traffic engineers to answer who developed the report, but we'll do our best to answer those tonight. Other upcoming project milestones that you guys should be aware of. First, as I mentioned, we plan to conduct the open house here in Crookston. Maybe council chambers, if you guys think that's an appropriate place. That's where we held a lot of them for the corridor study, but just something to think about probably late summer, and we would have an opportunity for the public to come in, folks to come in, and the project team will be here to answer questions and things like that. Second, we've already been meeting one-on-one with certain business owners in town. You guys might have seen Jake and myself around town a little bit, walking around. We met with a few folks to talk about ingress and egress needs during construction, truck turning movements, merchandise deliveries, things like that. We're planning to continue this work throughout the summer with the goal being an in-person meeting with every business owner who wants one at some point this summer. And additionally, our right-of-way agents will be reaching out to landowners along the project corridor to sit down and go over specific property impacts, whether that be a temporary impact or things like that during construction. So some more in-person meetings there. Third and final, as we get towards the tail end of summer, we are going to begin the process of municipal consent. So municipal consent is a state statute that mandates anytime MnDOT changes access, buys permanent right-of-way, or changes roadway capacity in a town. By law, they must be granted consent by the city council via resolution. So that's a process that'll play out beginning kind of this fall and into late fall and winter. I can go over a lot more detail on that at upcoming meetings and updates, or if you guys have questions, but just something to think about. In the meantime, the big thing for us to to work on is to ensure that you folks at the city and then us at MnDOT, we're both clear on ownership and maintenance roles going forward long-term once the project is complete, things like lighting, if we're talking about pedestrian crossing beacons, things like that, just making sure we're clear on roles and responsibilities there, so.
Would they ever consider a pedestrian beacon on Ash and Robert?
Yeah,
Or, you know, if you're
Yeah.
looking at eliminating streetlight?
yeah, that's something we have done, and MnDOT has eliminated signals elsewhere in the state. And in some cases, we've done we call it a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, so you might hear people throw around RRFB, but that's what you're describing as it's a push button activated flasher system that grabs drivers' attention, and that's a good way to get additional yield compliance to pedestrians and grab drivers' attention. They work well in low speed environments, not so much in high speed. And that is something that we would consider implementing if it's something the council wanted to see. We were talking about our RFBs or crossing beacons uptown here too, or in the main part of the one ways here at either Second or Fourth, or, you know, based on feedback from the city.
So I just want to be clear, so it's the DOT's recommendation not to have any traffic lights on either of the one-ways, is that correct?
No, we are saying that based on our reporting, we cannot justify reinstalling the signals at, both of them at Second Street, so on both Main and Broadway. And Second, and then jump all the way down to Ash Street and Highway 2. Those three, we're saying, based on the information we have today, we can't justify reinstalling them. Now the two signals on Roberts, we're saying do meet the justification, and we do intend on replacing those with brand new signals.
So when you go around and talk to business owners, have you been asking them questions about the traffic signals?
I have not, no. SRF and our traffic office have been working behind the scenes to fully vet all these intersections, and they look at things like volumes at side street delay, how long you're gonna wait there during peak time. We didn't want to get the cart ahead of the horse. We now today feel comfortable. The reports are at a draft point where we feel comfortable talking about it. So that's why, hence the update to you all. And from there we would.
So then if we decided we wanted traffic signals, is that on the city's dime to put them in?
MnDOT's position on that is, even if the city wants to offer to pay for them and maintain them, we still cannot put them in if they're not somehow legally justified. It really comes back to, but you guys probably know people like to sue, and as a state agency, we need to do things consistently around the state. And if we do things for this city special or different than this one, someone could build a negligence case if there is someone injured or killed there, or heaven forbid, but that's how they would build a case of negligence. So from our legal counsel standpoint, we're bound to the manuals and laws that govern us. And so we're saying, no, even if the city offers to pay for it, we would say it can't go there.
Okay.
I guess my bigger concern is just the safety of our downtown. And I feel like, you know, you have a lot of people that like act like they're race car drivers coming up to Roberts, right? And then it just feels like it kind of slows down the traffic by having that next light. And then I also think about like the pedestrians, especially our kids in the summertime with like crossing Ash to get to the library right there. And I'm just really concerned about, is this gonna create like faster traffic down Main and Broadway, and then like how we're truly addressing like the safety issues of pedestrians downtown? Because I think, you know, obviously that's all kind of top of mind, especially with the injuries and the deaths. But, you know, I think one of our biggest things is to make our downtown, you know, more viable. And part of that is making it safer to feel like you can walk across the street. And now we're taking out 3 lights that would be part of that safety piece. And I mean, for the traffic calming measures, I'm not seeing anything that's incredibly calming outside of like you going from 3 to 2 lanes. I mean, like, how are we still slowing down that traffic? I mean, those are the things
the big difference is those intersection bump outs at each of the quadrants. You know, breaking up that kind of linear viewscape the way it is today. So number one, we're bringing the curb lines in, but then also having those bump outs at the intersection locations. That is.
So is that moving the cars? And I just don't understand how that's slowing down the traffic.
So, one traffic engineering concept is when drivers have a wide open and linear viewscape in front of them, they tend to lean on the gas more and you feel comfortable driving faster when everything's way back to the side. But as your peripherals start to encroach in on you with a raised curb face, starting to encroach in right at the edge of where your wheels are gonna go, you naturally tend to slow down when you have a broken up and meandering viewscape like this, and we've seen that work in other communities, and so that's kind of the main point with what we're trying to do in this design is get that corridor narrowed up, not to the point where trucks can't get through and we can't, still have a, commercial operation, an ag operation. We need to make sure those folks can still run businesses and things like that, but trying to narrow the road where we can, where it makes sense to slow traffic down that way.
And so at Ash, are you guys doing the bump outs there as well?
On the side streets on Ash, yes, but we are also reducing lanes on Roberts Street as well.
Right, so I guess you're justifying not taking out the traffic light at Ash because you're gonna have bump outs and you'd have a traffic calming measure, but then are you putting them there as well or no?
Putting what?
The bump outs at Ash?
Yeah, and just so you guys know too, like at MnDOT, we don't view a signal as a traffic safety device for pedestrians. And I know runs probably counterintuitive, and I've kind of felt the same way at first too. But the studies have borne out that a lot of people get hit at signals. A lot of pedestrians do, and so there you won't hear us up here saying that it's going to be less safe for pedestrians to cross the road, because based on the statistics that we have as a state agency, it doesn't show that more people are going to get hit there. We're not saying it enhances the safety or improves the safety with no signal. Anytime you're crossing the road, it's going to be the same, whether it's at a signal or an unsignalized intersection. The pedestrian is going to need to make eye contact and make sure that those cars are coming to a stop, and when they are showing that they're going to yield, then they can cross the road. And they, like, as you mentioned, Jake, the other thing is there will no longer be, we're going to reduce lanes coming into town from the east, because we're getting rid of that right turn lane by the Tri-Valley building. So we're kind of narrowing that roadway corridor, and it'll be more predictable with one lane in either direction. So as that pedestrian sees cars coming and they know they're going to yield and they come to a stop, then they'll cross the road.
And the bump outs act as a safety measure for pedestrians, because that's gonna reduce the crossing width that they have to cross the street. It'll also improve sight lines, so they'll be further out in the intersection instead of behind parked cars. That bump out will put them kind of in line with those parked cars so that those pedestrians can view the traffic can see those pedestrians better. And those bump outs do delineate the parking a little bit more, so you can't park right up to the crosswalk. There's gonna be a taper to get out to that bump out width where there will be no parking. So it does improve the sight lines.
So if we don't have those rear traffic lights, you guys will have some type of signal put in there in lieu of?
A pedestrian crossing beacon of some sort, you're saying?
Yeah.
We would have that conversation with you guys, and we're open to that. I don't know that it would be at every single one, or maybe it makes sense. We advise them to go in where people want to cross the road. And if it's a place where there is a frequency of pedestrians crossing the road, then yes. But is it like every single block? No, we wouldn't do that, because
I was just actually referring to the ones in where you're taking out the traffic lights.
yeah, we could have that conversation about which ones make sense to put those in. We're not showing them in the plans as of today, but if you guys came to us and said we would like to see some type of pedestrian crossing enhancement.
Especially at Ash and Second, because we have the library there, we have the campground,
Swimming pool.
we have the swimming pool, and we have a movie theater. And those are very common areas for people to ride their bikes to,
Yep.
and to take those.
And there's only 2 or 3 exits out of that Woods Edition. So as Robert and Ash is one of the prime ones that pedestrians and kids go across near the library. I would want to see some type of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
The
just,
library and that movie theater right there, just,
Yep.
I know they're very popular areas where kids go.
Yeah.
The movie theater has like pop and stuff out front, and it's just a very popular area for kids to be.
Just the times I've been out here, I've witnessed pedestrians down in that area, and then the trail that goes under the bridge right there. So, yeah, I think that makes good sense, and we see them overall as a benefit, again, in low speed areas. They're not foolproof. There have been instances where pedestrians, and whether it's someone watching their phone and not really paying attention, they hit the button and just go. It can give you a false sense of security, so that is kind of the cautionary side of them, and there is not 100% yield compliance either, but overall it's a big enhancement over nothing, or just a striped crosswalk, so.
I think especially if you're taking out those traffic lights, there's, I think, an expectation that people have seen them, and those who are from out of town just going like straight through them, that there should be some type of, because especially like right out here out front, there's a lot of cross traffic right there. You know, people coming to the city, there isn't always enough parking on the side, so they're gonna cross that street. But to have something there to remind people that that's a crosswalk, I think is pretty imperative.
My question is, what time of year were those studies done too?
Yeah, we collected data we just talked about this in September, and then some of the counts were done in July. It kind of varied when the traffic data was collected. And that is the practice that we use at MnDOT, and in some cases, if it's like really high seasonal or really high like wintertime for some reason, or summertime, you know, there's adjustment factors that take into account. In the case of your guys' 3 signals that we're talking about, the warrants were like way off, like the justification, meaning like the traffic volumes were way below. I mean, even being close, like you know what I mean? It wasn't something where it was like 7 out of 8 it met, but so it just for reference. And then they also looked at side street delay, meaning, because that's a lot of concerns we get from folks as well. Will it be harder to turn left onto the highway? And like for you guys here, it's easier with the one ways. I mean, you're only waiting for one platoon of traffic to clear, but the side street delay, even in the peak times in the morning and evening, was still very low, down in the single digit seconds based on the
So would there
simulations.
be some kind of, I'm back on Robert Nash, would there be something warning of that light ahead of time? Because as you come down Robert Street, you're going in upward, you're not gonna see that until you get at least to the top of the bridge. Or
Are you saying
halfway.
coming westbound
Yes.
over the bridge? Yeah.
The sight line would be, in my opinion, out. Cause
Yeah.
that gives you, what, half a block at the most of that light flashing?
Well, you
Yeah.
would have Robert Street light though too.
Yeah, but I mean, as far
Further
as the sight
beyond
line
it.
coming from the east, getting west. As you
Yeah,
come
we
up
looked at
over
that,
the
'cause
curve and over the
we
bridge.
had the same thought that, you know, with the signal there's a sight distance issue, as we call it, with the kind of, there's a crest in the bridge, and
And a curve too.
yeah, the engineers took a close look at it, and it is meeting sight distance requirements for a safe and functional intersection. I think if we are gonna do an enhanced ped crossing there, which I think in our minds makes sense, and we always, like we say, want confirmation from the city that is a trip generator for pedestrians, and you know, hearing what you guys have to say, that sounds like a good location. We could look at potentially advanced warning. Some of your basic options are just like pavement markings, but those are, you know, covered up 5 months of the year in northern Minnesota. Some others are advanced signage about a pedestrian crossing ahead, stuff like that. So I think based on the curves and the crests that we see, it's not gonna be a dangerous situation to where we wouldn't want peds crossing there with a blind hill like that. But we could explore some advanced warning of some sort.
Would there also ever be consideration of MnDOT adding signs further out of town about the bypass area, so we don't have as much commercial vehicles coming through that don't need to come through downtown? I mean, the biggest thing that we hear is that people from out here aren't aware of that. It's not showing up on their GPS. They don't see the signs because there isn't good signage on that. I think that could also significantly affect.
Yeah. So we talked about that during our corridor study, actually, and attempts were made by MnDOT to get in touch with Google about having that truck bypass take people around the city, or at least truck drivers. But the problem was they said if we do that, then everyone's GPSs are gonna go that way. And the feedback we got from the city was, we don't want you to do that, right? Because the local businesses depend on that trunk highway traffic for patronage and things like that. So that was the issue, is we want the trucks to use the truck bypass, but not all the passenger vehicles.
I think the other question on that was that if not that, then is there a way to have better signage out there? Or more signage,
Yep.
where you have several signs before the bypass that allows those trucks to do, because that was the other.
Yeah, I had passed that along to our traffic group, and they were a little puzzled because they had said that that's, the signage that's out there, they're huge signs, but they are static. They had talked about potentially like a blinking amber, but normally they wouldn't use those unless it's like a work zone type thing or like something temporary. So I could ask them again about something. I mean, if you guys had an idea or wanted to explore like language with us, we could maybe do that. But our traffic group said that that's like as big of a sign as we put on those truck bypasses for the, for any given
It's just
bypass,
the
but.
one sign though, I believe, am I correct in that, or is it? I think
Yeah,
it's just the one.
it's just the one. Are you, maybe you guys are suggesting like multiple signs along the way, or,
Something
Just
to,
something
yeah.
to stop, windmill things coming through, or giant trucks in the middle of food season, or all the other fun stuff that has happened.
I think that's also something that you mentioned, the beat trucks, is like you guys did your studies in September and July, and a significant amount of traffic, it comes through for beat season. And so I'm assuming that data wasn't collected when they were coming through in October. And I just wonder if that's something that should be considered.
Yeah, that's always the question, is what about peak times? And I think we probably, it couldn't hurt to test that, or, what is it right now, June, and it won't be
We have
till
some
this
time.
fall sometime, but we can, and we probably should have that confirmed as part of the report. And when our engineers looked at it, they said it probably wouldn't sway it, but because it's such a short duration. But I think based on a safety consideration, or, it probably should be looked at anyways.
It's a short duration, because the farmers are trying to get those beets out of the fields, but at the same time, you have people that are driving 12 hours, 14 hours, and are exhausted, and they're driving through our downtown, and we have pedestrians walking through the downtown. So it's not just that the beet trucks are coming through, but you have this like immediacy of this agricultural piece for us, in which we have a lot of accidents in this area because of. So I think it definitely should be part of the consideration.
I think it's, the traffic has gotten down over the years since they put the bypass bridge out there. I think most of that I've seen, a lot of the farmers are using the truck bypass and the roads coming in. I've driven beat truck for a few years in past here, and we're pretty much said not to go through town.
But there is several, I think it still should be something that's noted in at least the data collected.
Yeah.
Just to do your due diligence.
Because we also have a lot of people that come up and drive beat trucks that are not from here.
Yep, let's ask the traffic engineers about that and we'll get back to you on that, about how we would incorporate something like that into the study. And I think that's a good
Actually,
point.
with the crystal sugar right there.
I think that's a good point, yeah. And it is amazing, even when we did our ADA field walk in town, there's still we were shocked by how many trucks we still saw trying to navigate the downtown, big full tractor trailer setups.
Oh, yeah.
And one even came up to the signal and couldn't make it at Roberts there and Broadway. He was coming from the south and couldn't make that turn, so.
Have you guys also had the conversation about the Tri-Valley building yet?
We have not pursued anything significant past the last presentation to the council.
So Matt, that's another conversation about having that Tri-Valley building being demolished, and if that is of some significance in how that design might be a little bit different, and maybe allow for a little bit more leeway in trucks turning there.
Yeah.
So I think that needs to be part of the greater conversation as well.
Okay, yeah, we're open to that, and we probably would, if we knew that building wasn't gonna be there, we would maybe purchase some property perhaps, like an angled corner or something, if it could enhance the design somehow.
A little bigger radius or something for the corner.
Yeah, we were talking earlier with some of the folks, city staff, about potentially doing like a large planter or something there on the corner to keep those truck drivers honest, keep them out away from that landing where peds are waiting. And
Right.
so we have some other ideas there at that corner too, so.
I just don't ever want what happened.
I know, yeah. No,
Yeah,
same
especially
with
when
us.
she was on the sidewalk where she should have been.
Yeah. That's our goal too. Do we wanna finish up with Jake? You had a couple highlights, right? You were
Yeah, I was just
over,
gonna
and then
give a-
maybe if you guys got more questions, we could do it after Jake's done.
I was gonna do a brief
Okay.
summary of some of the improvements along the corridors. So we did include two exhibits in your packet. One of them showing the layout of the corridor improvements, which is one that's shown on the screen there, and the other one was the cross-section, which showed the existing corridor and the proposed improvements. Note that they show that cross-section shows the number of lanes being reduced from 3 to 2 for the one-way pairs. Parking will remain, the parallel parking will remain. There will be sidewalks, bike lanes, boulevards, and what's shown on that is, from the boulevard standpoint, is still to be determined when it comes to treatments and aesthetics that could be incorporated into those boulevard areas. So the improvements along Broadway and Main, and this includes Trunk Highway 2, and it also includes the 2 blocks to the south between Roberts and Mooring. That is part of the city project that's included. This is part of the improvements. So the reduction from 3 lanes to 2 lanes. The curb lines will be moving approximately about 9 feet from each side. So we are balancing the improvements, keeping the center line of the roadway where it's at. The middle of those 2 lanes, the pavement will not be disturbed as part of this. It's not a full reconstruct. It's more of a reconstruction of the sidewalks. So basically from those 2 lanes and to the right of way, that is what's gonna be reconstructed as part of the project. The curb bump outs, we already talked about that quite a bit in detail, but it does reduce those pedestrian crossing widths. It delineates the parking of where you can and can't park. It also improves the sight lines, like I mentioned, for pedestrians, and also visibility of those peds from a driver's point of view. And it also offers opportunities to beautify the corridor, some aesthetic treatments and whatnot as well to make the corridor more inviting. Pedestrian facilities along the project will include on the outer side, I guess I would call it, the outer lane, which would be the east side on Broadway and the west side on Main. Will include a 5-foot bike lane. We call it an elevated bike lane, so that is on the sidewalk level. 6 to 8 foot sidewalk as well will be on that side. The other side of the street will just include a sidewalk with a more wider boulevard area. ADA compliance, so we will make sure that all the facilities, whether it be the curb ramps, the sidewalks, where the sidewalks are crossing driveways, all that will be designed to be ADA compliant as well. The boulevards and buffer zones, we call them, does provide that separation between the bikes or the peds from that oncoming traffic. So there'll be a little bit more room than what's out there now for that. And that also, like I mentioned, does provide opportunity to provide some streetscaping elements in there as well, and some information that we're gonna be needing from the city on what that means from a funding and everything else standpoint, what you guys want it to look like, and what opportunities you do have. The parallel parking will remain. That will include 9-foot wide parking spaces. So it's 7 feet of pavement plus your 2-foot gutter. Very similar to what's out there today. And that's pretty standard, maybe even a little wider than maybe is needed to allow for some door swings as well. Talked about the new signals at Roberts and Broadway and Roberts and Main. Those will be replaced. The current signal systems will be replaced. We talked about the potential removal of the signals at 2nd Street. And then we did talk about the pedestrian control a little bit with the flashing beacons. So we did work with the city engineer early on as part of this process. And it is something we're gonna be incorporating. It's just nailing down where does the city want those. We talked about 4th Street, we talked about 2nd, and now we just talked about Ash. So we'll work a lot more in detail with you folks on where it makes sense, where you see the most pedestrian activity to incorporate those into the design. Along Robert Street, we are gonna be removing one of the southbound lanes on Robert Street. And in replacing that with an on-street bike lane for one of those on the southbound side. We don't need as much width for that bike lane, so the curb lines are gonna move on Robert Street as well to provide wider sidewalks and some more guard areas. Also on Robert Street, parking on the north side of Roberts will remain in between Broadway and Main Street. Talked about the potential removal of signal at Ash Street, and then bump outs at Ash Street as well. 6th Street, the curb lines on 6th Street are not going to change, but we are going to be adding a shared use facility on the north side of 6th Street. So that's a 10-foot walkway that could incorporate bikes and pedestrians. So it's called a shared use path. On the west side of 6th and Main intersection, there is a current eastbound dual right turn lane. As part of the safety of that intersection, we are looking to remove the dual right turn and just have one right turn with a striped out buffer between the left and the right turn lane. That'll provide a little bit more delineation for vehicles coming from the other direction and vehicles that are wanting to turn right of what's going on.
And that's shown on your map in the inset in the upper right-hand corner and with the truck turning movements on there too.
We call that striped area a gore area. A lot of times you'll see that when you have the flashing yellow arrow intersections where you have the left turn offset from the driveway lanes, 3 lanes, and then that area is striped. That just provides a little bit more delineation and separation for that. So it'll help with the site views at that intersection. A couple other things that we're working on as part of the corridor is the access management. We've met with some property owners along the corridor, and we're gonna continue to do so to talk about their access. How do they use their access? What's their site circulation? Are there opportunities to either close an access that is not being utilized? You know, eliminating some of those access points and conflict points with Trunk Highway 2 traffic, as well as talking about could we consolidate access points to their property with that. So those are some things that we are looking at as well. Also potential relocating of the driveway access to a different spot to either get it away from proximity to the intersection or just to make it a little bit more safer.
Yeah, and that's something that we're working with them on, and in some cases, business owners are excited about that today. We've had some ask us to please do that. In other cases, there's a reason, deeded access, easements, things that for reasons we can't close an access, so we're deferring to those decisions based on what can we work with folks on and where is the line at, deferring to that.
In addition to the reconstruction areas along the pavement that we're not going to be tearing up, there are going to be some concrete panel repairs or replacements called CPR to improve some of the crack joints and other things along the corridor. MnDOT was out here last week, 2 weeks ago?
5th, I think.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, painting those areas that need to be repaired. The pavement there. And another thing that we are just getting into discussions, and we kind of have a good idea of how this is going to be constructed as far as how are we gonna stage this, where's the traffic gonna go. Preliminarily, we are looking at keeping Trunk Highway 2 open in the downtown area by just reducing lanes and working on one side of the corridor at a time, allowing traffic to remain on Trunk Highway 2. So those some of the preliminary, we haven't gotten into the details of how that's all going to work or which side is closed first, vice versa. But we are planning on having traffic remain able to travel through the corridor.
And will you guys give business owners like several months heads up on that?
Yep, and there will be a component of public engagement even during construction as well. That will occur. And
Yeah.
that is also part of, when we are talking with the business owners and property owners. What are their needs during construction, you know, how is construction going to impact them? And those are conversations we are having with those owners. A few things that we are gonna be needing from the city, and I know the city engineers and A2S and Chuck and Jeff are gonna be working with you guys to get input, is the aesthetics for the corridor. So that's the, you know, verification of where do we want grass areas or landscaping areas. Where do we want hardscape surface such as your concretes? Could we do colored concrete, stamped colored concrete, those types of decisions. Planters and vegetation, we talked about a planter potentially at the corner of Roberts and Broadway to help with keeping those truck drivers honest in their turns. Any other plantings such as trees, do we want to incorporate that? You know, what are the costs of that? All those things need to be discussed and kind of vetted for us to move forward. So we're gonna be looking for input. Along with that is the streetlights. You know, what type of unit do we want to install? Because we are gonna be replacing the streetlights that are currently out there today. It's the globe style. With federal funds, that style of light is no longer compliant for use with federal funds because of the light shining upwards instead of completely downwards.
Lighting pollution, they call it, so it's gotta point down. So.
That's cost share, right?
That's right. Yep. Yep, along with a lot of the, when we start talking aesthetics, you know, there's local cost responsibility involved, so we wanna right size this and work with you guys. It'll be an iterative process, and we've started these conversations, but what can the city take on? And then there's also the long-term ownership and maintenance of it, or kind of other key considerations, so work with the city to kind of right size this based on the appetite that's there.
And then the last item that we'll be coordinating with your engineers at A2S is city utilities, sewer, water modifications that need to be made with the design modifications and changes are gonna happen.
That's what we had, yeah. Other questions in the meantime, or you wanna do another round?
My only other question is, and we had talked about this initially when we did the local thing, is about the school and wondering if there's possibility to have an RFB put at the school crossing.
Is that over by Lawrence?
It's Fletcher and Broadway. But it has always been like people are coming off of that bridge, and again, there's kind of that horizontal slope, and then like they're speeding so fast into the downtown. And the city's way of managing it right now is putting up some like little stands that say school crossing, but they're only really viable for like 2 or 3 months out of the year, because then with snow removal, they're taken out. And I will tell you how many times those have been hit is ridiculous. And there's children that are being dropped off and picked up and crossing that street every day during the school year. And so I'm just curious about the consideration for that as well.
Yeah, and that would actually be a city street, right? So that would be totally up to you guys on that.
But don't we need your authorization for that or no? So
Not on the trunk highway. Would not.
You guys could.
that's not considered part of it since it's a city segment?
We're going to, I know it's confusing because we're preparing this as one plan set, right, what you're seeing. South of Roberts is actually like city-owned streets, right? But we're developing one plan set. We plan to have one contractor when we
Right.
advertise this and award it. So it's kind of 2 jobs, but it's also kind of one. So.
Okay. But that is something that we wouldn't need your authorization
Right.
for.
You
but
guys can
something
do whatever
that
you
we could
want down
request
there.
it If you guys are already gonna do those other ones.
Yep, city street. We would have defer to you guys, whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Yes, that improvement was mentioned in the corridor study.
Yeah.
In process.
Yeah, so I made a couple notes here, so Jake, we should work with the engineering staff and your public works staff and these ideas on the RRFB locations, and I think we got a little bit of time here to kind of mull this. I know we're hitting you with a lot of new information, so if we need to, come back and talk about a little more, we have some standing meetings, like recurring meetings, and we'll get these RRFBs set where you guys think they make good sense, and from our perspective, from a pedestrian and highway safety perspective, if it makes sense on our side. But yeah, we expect that we'll be installing RFBs in town, so.
I mentioned the schedule, where we're at.
Yeah, schedule wise, we're between the 30 and 60% plans.
Yep, so preliminary layout and preliminary design has been completed. We're working on developing the kind of final design, we call it, and plan documents. We're in between that 30% to 60% complete.
So final designs that would see on an open house.
Yeah, we were thinking timing wise later this summer even for an open house. We won't have final plans, but that's okay. We thought it would just be important to just get out in front of the community anyways. And but even if it's just an exhibit level, something like this, just for folks to see and ask questions. And sometimes people bring up good points and they're like, hey, did you guys think of this or whatever? And we would have time to incorporate those edits still. So it won't be final, but we were thinking this summer. And then we always do a final open house right before construction. We get our construction staff involved and we talk about staging and what the public can expect the following summer. So we're still driving at 2027 construction season on this. So.
Well, I think, Matt, initially when you came in, one of the biggest concerns was the buy-in from the community, right? And so I think anywhere that we can do that is important, so.
Yeah.
So my idea too is as a city to get rid of the Tri-Valley building, so if that's a possibility, would we get that sidewalk off the street? Would it be, there would be a buffer between the street and the sidewalk?
It'll still be a similar arrangement to what's there today, but we could potentially get that landing pulled back. When we say landing, that's like the level area concrete with the push buttons by it. We could potentially slide that away from the curb further and it makes the ramps longer. But, you know, you can only go so far back with it, you know what I mean? So there wouldn't be any kind of like full separation. There would still be the ramps as you see today, but it'll be greatly improved. We could, like you said, Jake, we could widen out that radius if that building wasn't there. You know, we could make that a much more forgiving right turn even for drivers, and we would.
So widening it,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah.
Yeah, the new curb line is gonna go very similar to where those vertical barriers are,
Yep.
those temporary barriers. So that curb line is moving up. Sure. To about where those are at right now.
But ideally, it probably would be better if we could widen that space out for those turning
Yeah.
trucks, correct?
We would see that as a benefit.
Yep.
Make things more visible too, coming up.
Well, yeah, not having that building there,
Yeah.
in that blind spot.
If there's someone standing there waiting, that building's not obstructing the view.
Any other questions? Okay,
Thank you.
anything else to add?
Yeah, we'll just appreciate your guys' time. We'll keep working with the city staff we've been working with, and by all means, let us know if you guys have other input you wanna send our way. Chuck and folks, Jeff have my email and things like that, so I'll reach out. But I made a couple notes here, so we'll follow up on the beat truck question and others, so.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. This brings us to the agenda. Does anyone wish to add anything to tonight's agenda? Do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I'll make that motion, Your Honor.
Second.
Got Clayton and Henry. Thank you. Question? Hearing none, can I have roll call, please?
Brecken.
Aye.
Plot.
Aye.
Hibma.
Aye.
Jurdy.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye.
Briggs.
Aye.
Cavalier.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. This brings us to the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent agenda? I have a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda. Thank you, Don. Is there a second?
I'll
Second.
it.
The question? Is that okay? You want
Sure.
the consent agenda? The last item on it, I'm just wondering for clarification. I thought the two people on the cheetah board had to be council members.
Ain't I a council member?
Not a voting council member. You know what I mean? Just,
I guess in the past, I know we've had previous mayor set on the cheetah board.
okay, that's all. I just wanted clarification. I thought it had to be two
Okay,
I think what would be a little bit different is the fact that it's more of an advisory board, correct? Too,
right.
just like
Yeah.
anything else is advisory.
Okay, I had a motion and second by who?
So you had,
Clayton and then,
so Don Cavalier.
Don and
I didn't hear the second.
I'll second.
Okay.
second by Christie, thank you. Roll call, please.
Brecken.
Aye.
Clot.
Aye.
Kivma.
Aye.
Jurdy.
Aye.
Fisher. Briggs.
Aye.
Cavalier.
Okay, motion carries. No public hearings, brings us to regular agenda. Ashley, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Item 8.01 is a resolution regarding the approval of AE2S Task Order Number 18, Stormwater Resilience and Master Plan, Your Honor.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Henry. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Delane. Thank you. Discussion. Anything to add to this, Jeff?
No, Mr. Mayor, I will defer to Chuck and AE2S for any information on the next three items.
So I guess for all three items, just throw it out there regarding the stormwater master plan. Does this, I know it was brought up in the past as possible that we gotta have retention ponds.
So, as a part of kind of this stormwater, master plan, what we'll be looking at is your existing city infrastructure, seeing how it can handle today's events, as well as taking a look at, the Red Lake River during flood events and helping the city, develop, information and planning for when do we actually close these gates, which ones go when. And this master plan also helps inform, better inform your CIP. The CIP didn't look at models like this for each of your existing utilities. So what this does is actually makes it all that much more powerful. And the stormwater master plan also is something that the city's gonna be able to use in funding applications as well. So what we'll be looking at is, your existing infrastructure, maybe ways that it can be optimized. If there's localized flooding in places, how can we fix that at a high level, and then maybe identify some proposed future improvements too. So it's pretty broad reaching in its scope with your stormwater infrastructure, as well as, providing the city with a little bit more information and data, in places where there's known flooding issues with new developments, in various parts of town as well, so.
Stephen, does it also look at like the capacity of the pump stations and if they're like
Yeah, that's exactly.
optimized or not?
Yes, that's exactly what it'll do. So when we did the CIP, what was really looked at more so was age of your infrastructure. What this would look at is if you have a rainfall event, is your infrastructure designed to really handle that, and given different scenarios, how will it perform? So proposed improvements will come out of this, and building a model and actually having data drive your decisions. It's gonna be huge going forward, so.
So I'm just thinking of like a lot of the flood events that we've had, right? And we've had like to the point where we were over capacity for being able to take care of that water. So is this also gonna be able to identify like if we need larger pump stations or more pump stations or?
Yeah, it'll take all of that basically into account, so, I don't know if you necessarily, you might see more retention, as Mayor Sandberg mentioned, but those might be things as well, as looking at what your discharges is, or what can you do, how can you better optimize what you already have, so.
Does that also help us inform like when we should be closing gates or opening
Yes.
gates and things like that at
Yep.
like a certain flood level or what have you?
Yeah, we're gonna be developing models that look at the river level, and how that impacts, your city infrastructure. So, that's kind of the cool thing about this, master planning effort is it's all encompassing. It's not just the city infrastructure, but you're looking at the Red Lake River and the watershed kind of as a whole as it pertains to the city of Crookston. So it'll help drive those decisions for sure.
All right, thank you. Further discussion? Can I have roll call, please?
Brecken.
Aye.
Flott.
Aye.
Hibma.
Aye.
Jurdy.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye.
Briggs.
Aye.
Cavalier.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Item 8.02 is a resolution regarding awarding the contract and authorizing the execution. Okay,
Execution.
yeah, execution of an agreement with Spruce Valley Corporation and the Lift Station 5 sanitary force main replacement project.
Thank you, Ashley. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved, Your Honor.
Thank you, Clayton. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Derek. Thank you. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is a planned replacement in the CIP, in the current year CIP. For the details, I'll defer to Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So Lift Station 5 Force Main Replacement Project, this had really came about in talking to Brandon in previous years that residents on Memorial and Locken during rainfall events would experience backups in their basement. A lot of it's due to the I&I of your existing infrastructure. That's infiltration and inflow of rainwater getting into your sanitary sewer. One proposed solution that we had looked at to help alleviate this is Lift Station 5 currently will pump into a force main. That existing force main is a 4-inch force main. What we had looked at and seen is that it's actually undersized, and by upsizing that force main, you're able to use the existing lift station pumps to almost double or triple the flow that lift station is possible producing. So what we had looked at is a trenchless solution. So replacing that existing force main by either pipe bursting or directional drilling. So what we'd be looking at is from lift station 5 up into the top of the hill at Locken, trying to go a trenchless method to replace that force main and upsize it and limit disruption. We anticipate this project to take roughly a week or so if all goes to plan. What we had done is solicited quotes from qualified bidders, and we had received 2 different bids on this project. Spruce Valley came in as the apparent low bid at $145,295. What we're doing is recommending the council approve the bid from Spruce Valley and authorize the execution of an agreement with the contractor. We anticipate contingent upon approval of the council, this project taking place late summer or this fall.
And so this would help mitigate our residents having the backed up sewer, the issue that we had.
Yes,
previously.
yep, correct. We see this as one phase of a multi-phase improvement project on that lift station. There's some concerns about health and safety of workers as well, and then optimization.
Is that the one with the issue of the air quality in that lift station?
That's one of the other ones too. So that's identified in the CIP as well. This one,
Okay.
it's confined spaces, very deep, hard to work on. So we see this as the first phase that residents can see noticeable improvement with their homes, so.
And so Stephen, have you worked with Spruce Valley before?
Yeah, we've worked with them in the past, and the city's worked with them in the past as
Great.
well, so.
And then when we say trenchless, what do we mean by that?
So what we'll be doing is directional drilling this likely. So instead of open cutting and closing the road, we'll be what's called boring. So basically taking a drill, running the pipe up the street. You won't see any of the construction except for where the connection points are made at. So trying to do that to minimize disruption, and being that this project is focused on one utility rather than a full replacement. We saw this as a efficient way to try and
Tear up
execute the
stuff.
project, so.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? May I have roll call, please?
Brecken,
Aye.
Plot,
Aye.
Hivma,
Aye.
Jurdy,
Aye.
Fisher,
Aye.
Briggs,
Aye.
Cavalier.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Item 8.03 is a resolution authorizing the City of Crookston to enter into agreement with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency through the Small Communities Planning Grant Program for stormwater, wastewater, and community resilience in the support of the City of Crookston Stormwater Resilience and Master Plan Project, Your Honor.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
Make that motion, Your Honor.
Thank you, Don. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Henry. Discussion. Anything to add, Jeff?
No, sir. Again, I'll defer to Stephen for the details on this particular project. It's in support of 8.01
Thank you.
already passed.
Yeah, in support of 8.01, A2S in the city of Crookston, December, January, submitted a grant application to the MPCA in the tune of $209,000, just shy of $210,000 for the study and master planning report. The entire scope of work is anticipated to have a total project cost of about $239,000. $11,000 of that is the city cash match. The other delta that you're seeing would be the city in-kind work. So as part of this effort, what we're looking at is community engagement, so possibly mailers, website, development of stuff like that, as well as using some of the city staff to help and assist with survey and collection of data. So as part of the their daily duties. So this grant agreement will be for about $2,010 or $200,000 of that effort. So.
Great.
Thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none, can I roll call, please?
Brecken,
Aye.
Plot,
Aye.
Hivma,
Aye.
Jurdy,
Aye.
Fisher,
Aye.
Briggs, Cavalier.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Stephen.
Yep, thank you.
Item 8.04 is a resolution regarding the request for proposals, the RFP regarding the Pool Feasibility Study for the City of Crookston, Your Honor.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
I'll make that motion, Your Honor.
Thank Clayton. Second by Derek. Thank you. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, at the last park board meeting, items of maintenance were discussed regarding the city pool and any anticipated repairs and updates in order to prolong its life while we determine a course of action moving forward. It has been recommended by the park board where we are requesting from the council authorization to go out for RFP to do a feasibility study for the pool to do the repairs. What this feasibility study would do is it identifies all of the items recommended for repair. It creates a phased list and it creates a phasing project and a cost estimate for each of the items moving forward to bring the pool up to a standard to extend its life up to 10, hopefully 15 years while we determine the course of a replacement given the condition of the pool.
So how is this different from the study that we had a couple years ago?
It is much greater in detail. It actually looks at each of the items, creates cost estimates, creates timelines, and creates phases. It basically is everything to plan the work, except right up to the point of being able to do the work.
Okay.
So
And
Delane,
it also looks at a feasibility study on a new pool for the future.
It does not do that, sir. This would be simply for the repair to upgrade the current facility to extend its
Is
life.
there any way that a feasibility study can be done for a new pool for the city of Crookston?
It can be, that would be putting out for bids. However, in order to do that, we would have to engage a firm to design the pool for that, what the city would like in its place. That would be a separate.
I think what this actually does, this feasibility study, is, well, first of all, it gives dollar amounts to those who've been fundraising for it. But I think it also provides the necessary data if they were to go out for different grants or loans or things like that, that they actually have like the actual study that's done in order to prolong that. And I think that's a big part of what the community has been asking for, is those actual hard numbers. So then they can also fundraise themselves as a community, but also to apply for grants that require that type of like hard data.
So I can speak on, I was at the park board meeting and part of this discussion. So a few things, the park board had asked, we had sent it back to the park board and asked for their recommendations. Some of the feedback that we got from the park board members had was they were asking for clarification from council on exactly what their role is, what we are expecting of them. Theirs was they don't have a budget to work with, so they're just asking for, when we send it back to them, exactly clarification of what we are asking from them and what we expect from them. The other thing is that we were also given a report from Lunseth that is not part of the report that we have had for the engineering report, because that report did not have the plumbing and the infrastructure on that end. There was now another report from Lunseth. I think that was about $60,000 or $70,000 of other repairs that would be needed. And so the park board's thought was, we need something to tie all of these different reports together and what the phases were. Now, clearly, this will cost money. Requesting the RFP does not cost the money. Now we may get it back and say we can't afford the RFP on that end. But that was the park board's recommendation of saying, this is what they felt they understood of us asking for.
I think I agree with what they're saying. The only thing is that, say we come up with a great plan, but at the end of that plan, we're still gonna be back to where we are today. So I mean, I think if we don't move forward to try to figure out how do we get this existing pool to get some more life out of it, and at the same time, working towards having something new to look forward to.
I will also say that I think felt like the park board was against. There was also the discussion as if we built something. I think that was back on the city of like, is that what we're asking the park board to do, or that end? I mean, I fully agree that if there's the plan of us doing something else, then have that discussion and looking at that, which again costs money, but at least it's, again, something of moving towards a plan.
I mean, I can get on board with extending the life of the pool with tax dollars, if there's something to look forward to at the end of it. I mean, to extend it to however many years, we're going to continue to end up in the same spot that we are right now.
Well, I think there's two things here. One is that this is just proposals, so we're just asking how much it's gonna cost, and then I think the council can make a decision as if FinFit has some funding for us to do that. I think there's some opportunities there. Right now, all we're asking for is proposals for how much it would cost. I think the other part of that is that it is not the park board's responsibility to plan out pools going forward. That's the council, that's the city
I never said it
administrators.
was. But
No,
I mean,
I'm just telling you, like, this is part of like the overall plan. Are we gonna bond? Are we gonna bond for a pool? Are we gonna bond for streets? What are we gonna do? And I think that's part of the conversation that we haven't had yet. And so any type of bonding or any type of thing, you're gonna have to have architectural structure drawings for any of those things before we can even go to bond it, right? And so I think that's a whole other phased thing. I don't think there's anybody here that would disagree that they would want a new pool, right? But that's gonna be part of a larger discussion that's gonna take multiple years for us to even get to. So I definitely think that it should be part, if that is something we think as council we wanna do, but that needs to be part of a conversation that we're having as part of our overall strategic plan for the next 5-10 years as to what we want to bond for and how we go forward with that. So it's kind of a separate conversation, but it is a conversation that we should be having now.
I agree with having the conversation, but as far as planning for our future and getting our architectural drawings on a pool. I also think we need our comp plan here sooner than later so we can figure out where we're gonna move forward as council.
Right, but I think that we also have other things that we should be talking about now. We already have our studies for all the assessed facilities for our streets. So that should already be part of the conversation going forward and what we're gonna be doing in the next 5 to 10 years.
So stay on track here regarding RFP proposals for a pool feasibility study, further discussion?
And again, this is for the current pool.
Yes, correct. And it's just an RFP to find out what the cost for a feasibility study is.
Call, please.
Brecken,
Aye.
Plot,
Aye.
Hibma. Aye. Jurdy,
Aye.
Fisher,
Aye.
Briggs,
Aye.
Cavalier.
Whoops, sorry. Motion carries. Moving on.
Item 8.05 is a resolution authorizing to retain an attorney to assist the City of Crookston in evaluating an employment-related complaint, Your Honor.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
We got Christie and Clayton. Tanner will give us a little discussion update going on here. Thank
Just
you.
very briefly, first, I did make a couple tweaks to the resolution you have in your packet, just fixing grammatical errors. First, the resolution authorizing the retention of an attorney instead of retaining an attorney. And then under paragraph 3, in the event that A, Mr. Jacobson is unavailable rather than available. Just as a background, we received a employment-related complaint alleging misconduct by an individual in the city. I've spoken to the League of Minnesota Cities regarding this, and given this, they've requested that we hire an independent investigator to perform their own investigation and potentially give us some guidance on moving forward, what that might look like. The person that I've spoken to is Mr. Jacobson. He's in Alexandria, Minnesota. He speaks on behalf of the League of Minnesota Cities at a lot of events, does training. I believe he's the city attorney for at least Alexandria, but a number of other cities, and he also has the added benefit of being an employment law focused attorney. He would be willing to do that. That's the individual that I would recommend. However, the League of Minnesota Cities did provide me with other individuals as well if the council has some strong opposition to Mr. Jacobson. But that is all I can provide now. A lot of this information is protected personnel data. It can't be disclosed beyond this, so I don't have a whole lot of information I can provide.
So the reason that you can is because it'd be a conflict of interest? No.
Because,
Private information.
yeah, there's certain data classifications when a city does certain things. A lot of it is presumed to be public, but personnel data is generally presumed to be private data, and especially when it's allegations at this point.
So we okay with going with Mr. Jacobson? Okay, let's call for the vote.
Brecken,
Aye.
Plot,
Aye.
Hibma. Aye. Jurdy,
Aye.
Fisher,
Aye.
Briggs,
Aye.
Cavalier.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Item 8.06 is a resolution regarding the appointment to fill the vacant at-large council member seat, Your Honor.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
Can I better understand this resolution?
Mr. Mayor, we would need to have a resolution made to identify a candidate or work with a process. I have spoken with the 3 finalists prior, all 3, Joseph, Gina, and Wendy have all identified that should the council decide they're willing to serve. I provide no recommendation as to any particular individual, as that is a council decision. The process, there are multiple processes we can follow. One would be to invite any president of the candidates for basically a 1 to 2 minute elevator speech to remind the council of their desire and their qualifications, followed by a motion to make resolution for a particular candidate, followed by discussion and a vote. The other would be simply move forward as we have already interviewed said candidates and make a motion to identifying a particular candidate along with discussion.
I would like to have a conversation before we do any of those things, because I don't quite understand what happened last time, and I want some clarification. Democratically, we voted for the candidates that were here, and the candidate with the most votes won. And so generally, it is just a formality in which we then vote for them in the next one. So my question is, I have two. One is, if there are those who voted against it, what is the justification? I think for transparency, I think that is key for the city. I personally felt that Joseph was somebody who actually read through our reports, had the experience. So unless there's some blaringly concerning thing, I'm not quite understanding why anyone but would vote no, though that is of your prerogative. My other concern is, has there been any conversation between council members in which someone has been called and told to vote no?
Second question, I don't believe there was any conversation between council members to vote no, but I'm thinking back when we should have had a runoff between the top two, because I had the gut feeling that we didn't have 5 votes, and you're gonna need 5 votes once it gets down here.
And that's fine, and if we want to do a rerun of that part, I'm more comfortable with that than I am with what happened last week.
I mean, the answer is I don't have to give you a justification on my
Well,
vote.
you need to give your community a justification. You're representing them. There should be justification as to why we're not voting for somebody. Because democratically, I voted for Joseph.
You weren't here, you didn't vote.
Well, I didn't vote last time, no, because it was supposed to have been in formality. Yes, and that was on me,
So,
and
I
I
mean,
take
he had
ownership for
he had
that.
3 votes, and that's a far cry from the 5 needed to get, so
Then
he,
let's have a runoff between the top 2 candidates then and go from there. But I think there needs to be some sort of semblance of understanding that the way that was handled was so poor last time, and that it should have been done appropriately. So, and I also think that we should all justify as to why we're voting for somebody. And we did that last time when we were filling the seat with Wendy. We justified why we voted for a person. It was not a closed vote. It was an open vote. We all went around and did it. And in all transparency, which I think truly, as a democratically elected here, we should be justifying and being transparent about how we're voting and why.
so I don't think we need to have them come down to give a speech or anything. That's just my thought. I mean, I know we already voted on Joseph, so I'm gonna make a motion that we move on to the next person on the list, and that's Wendy, I think.
So I have a problem with that
So I made a
because 3
motion.
people voted for that. And now you're like, I don't like that vote, so I'm single-handedly deciding for the council that I'm moving on.
Any different than what you're doing?
No, he won, fair and square. So I think that if you want to do anything, you vote, you have a runoff between the 2, like the mayor says, and then we go from there.
He did not win fair and square, and we shouldn't say win fair and square. It wasn't,
By the most votes, what is,
no, but our
You needed
fair and
5.
square is our charter says 5.
all right, then let's have that.
Make a motion.
So I made a motion to move on to Wendy as the next person in line. That was after Joseph when we had the consensus of 3. The next person was Wendy, and so I make a motion to have a vote on Wendy.
I'll second that motion.
We got a motion by Delane, second by Don.
And so we've just decided that's how we're gonna do it. And that's not, is that a decision that the whole council is making?
Well, you.
Why wouldn't you just have a runoff
Chance-
between Joseph
chance
and
to
Wendy if
vote.
that's the
You can vote
concern?
no on the resolution.
But then that means that Joseph has no chance. Why
Well,
wouldn't
if
you do a
if-
runoff between the
if more-
2?
If we don't get
Christie-
5 votes for this resolution, it won't go
But Christie, he
forward.
did have a chance. He had the resolution. It didn't get voted on.
No, you had 2 people that had voted no, and you weren't there and I wasn't there. So why is it that you can't do a runoff with the 2 people on top?
Fair chance.
We had a
We had
quorum.
two people gone.
We had a
Right,
quorum.
so why
Family
don't you do a runoff between the 2? That is more fair than you just deciding to
I already made
completely.
a motion.
The motion's in.
Motion and a second has been made. So
Roll call.
for putting Wendy in.
So this is a resolution regarding the appointment of Wendy Alt to fill the vacant at-large council member seat.
Thank you.
Not
Brecken?
right.
Platt?
Aye.
Kivma?
Aye.
Jurdy?
Nay.
Fisher?
Aye.
Briggs?
Nay.
Cavalier?
Aye.
We have a 4-3, it fails, we need to have 5.
So I make a motion that we move with Gina as the next person of the
Make it
three.
more right.
I'll second that.
Okay, we got a motion by Delane, second by Morgan to move Gina to the vote, I guess.
Brecken?
Nay.
Platt?
Aye.
Kivma?
Aye.
Jurdy?
Nay.
Fisher?
Aye.
Briggs?
Nay.
Cavalier?
Aye.
That again is 4-3. It is failed due to the lack of 5
So
votes.
I brought up to Jeff back a while ago, we kind of had of course, it wasn't in a large position, but we just had a community that was interested in serving on a panel to put the next person in that chair. And who was ever interested in running or to fill that vacancy could also apply. And the community picked the person to sit in that chair.
And it still has to be approved by the council, correct?
Correct. But we had no issue in the past going that way. Or you can have a special election which costs money, or we can leave it vacant until the following election.
I mean, since we voted on all three of the people then I move that we just leave it open until the next election.
Is there a second on that?
On that one, I'm gonna need to look at that. I wanna make sure that we don't have to fill that seat. I don't know that for sure. I'm guessing that we don't have to fill the seat, given it's a relatively short period of time. But if the discussion on these candidates is done for tonight, and it sounds like you're just asking about moving forward, what we wanna do, we don't need another motion to make a decision like that at this point. We just need to kind of have an idea of what, if we want to try the public committee route, or if we want to do a special election, we could start looking at that. Or if we want to do nothing, then we can look at that too. But we don't need a motion or resolution on this next part yet.
How much does a special election cost?
It's not cheap.
Too much.
I think Tanner, it would be nice to actually have the confirmed options and what those all entail and how that would run as far as the community. And then I think then we make that decision next council meeting, but I'd rather make that as an informed decision and not just what we hope or think we know.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine if Jeff and I can work together on the options. I do think they are what was outlined first special election, and I know we already had conversations on about how much that costs. I don't want to say the wrong number, but.
It's not cheap, but it would be good to know that at the next meeting as well.
And then I do think the next option would be to have council, I mean, anyone at any point could make a motion for someone and have it run through. But the other option then would be just to do nothing, I guess, and leave it vacant and wait for the next term, or what was proposed with this committee. We've done that in the past too, but we can explore what those are and just go from there.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know, I don't think it's a bad idea. We've done it in the past. We can get someone in this seat sooner, I think, if we just have a community forum to pick, and who's ever interested in filling that vacancy. And council takes the recommendations, whoever they want put in that chair.
I'm okay with that.
I think you'll get someone in that chair a lot faster than we keep dragging this out, next thing you know, it'll be October or September, and so.
Make a motion.
He says you didn't need to make a motion.
So you'll have more details for us at the next meeting as to what that looks like.
So, okay, yes, sir.
Matt Rossu, 200 Gulf Terrace. If we do the community forum or whatever for someone to pick, who's to say that the council won't then just vote it down again?
Well, I guess past history, because we've done it, I know twice, maybe 3 times, twice for sure, we didn't have an issue that time. I know I was involved with one years ago,
This is a different council than unfortunately.
but I think, I hear where you're coming from, but I just think that past history shows that the council would take the recommendations from that committee to put that person in that seat.
And there's no one here tonight that wants to make a motion to vote for Joseph. I mean, someone,
I mean, I'll make the motion to vote for Joseph, but I feel like it's
Well,
obviously
it's-
not gonna do anything for us.
We're gonna be in the same 4-3 situation, so I think we just move forward.
the council just, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, just as a collective, just
I was put in this
looks
position
really bad.
by community. And then with 2 other candidates, and went through their interview process and was appointed to this position.
I think,
Way it should be done.
once we get the money, how much a special election, I think
Oh, right.
a lot of the public has lost confidence at this point, so that's just my 2 cents.
I think the community route, Matt, is the other route, and that's not a cost to the community, or to the community, so. But we can look at what that looks like at the next meeting, so we have a better idea of what that looks like.
Okay. Moving on, reports, got anything to add, Jeff?
No, Mr. Mayor, you have my written report. As you know, I was out of town taking some vacation days last week. I will be out of the office tomorrow and Wednesday. I'll be attending a follow-up training to a risk assessment course that Chief Helsab and I began a couple of months ago. At which case then I will be, and Thursday is Juneteenth holiday, City Hall will be closed. And outside of that, I have no other reports.
Thank you. Clayton, anything?
Nothing to report, Your Honor.
Thank you. Henry?
Nothing for me.
Thank you. Christie?
I just want to offer my condolences to the Hortman family and the Hoffman family for the assassination attempt and assassination of the husband and wife this weekend. It's quite tragic and quite scary for us as a country.
Thank you.
Nope, nothing more.
Elaine?
Nothing tonight.
Eric?
Gina, Wendy, I appreciate you guys being here tonight, showing that you're still interested, and I'm sorry I had to vote no for both of you, but I was not comfortable with the way things went. Process, that's it.
Thank you. Don?
No report, Your Honor.
Echo what Christie said, what happened down in the Twin Cities, scary stuff. Condolences, Wendy and Gina, thank you for being here. So that's all I have. Just a reminder, we are not having a Ways and Means Committee meeting tonight, so nothing else for council. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.